think it's one of the greatest challenges of managers and leaders is to learn to consciously focus on identity and role and learn to manage both separately, how to keep them not overlapping and flooding into each other and blending into each other, which is often a big problem, particularly at the top leadership level.
Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to the Revolving Change podcast, where we're dedicated to your career and business growth by implementing lasting, measurable change. I am one of your regular hosts. I'm Joanna, and I'm a junior coach here at Revolving Change. And here with me today on a regular is one of our founders, Mr. Jorge Lobel.
Thank you. Here you're permanent, still analog dinosaur present.
Correct. Well, it nothing pays for experience. So you being a dinosaur is very, very valuable, Jorge. Speaking of our dedication to your career and business growth, you can access our show notes by logging into the learning portal if you're an existing core member. And if you're not, don't worry. You can just sign up for free by clicking on the link below, and you will not only get access to this podcast, but also to the show notes of all of the podcasts we've done so far. Okay, so our topic today is very, very, well, I always say it's very interesting, but today it's extra special because we're going to be talking about identity roles. And you and I, Jorge, have experienced multiple things today on a personal level and also on a business level. And now we have to record a podcast and sit here, and just show people
BNR.
yeah, go into the role of people delivering value through this podcast, despite whatever
I
else
think
is
it's
going
one
on
of
in
the
the
greatest
background.
challenges of managers and leaders is to learn to consciously focus on identity and role and learn to manage both separately, how to keep them not overlapping and flooding into each other and blending into each other, which is often a big problem, particularly at the top leadership level. And that
Yeah,
is a
right?
subject where we have coached senior executives of large companies where that became the critical element for their success, understanding how
Mm.
to switch between roles and
Mm.
knowing that their identity is basically untouchable. So,
All right.
yeah.
So now that before we move on into like talking about how to actually switch, um, how do we define identity and how do we
Identity
delineate
is the
that from
foundation
roles?
of each one of us, our value system, our belief system, our education, our learning, the teachings that we learned over time, because sometimes it is formal, sometimes it is informal. And that
Hmm.
who we are is our identity, not what we do. Are we loving and caring? Are we patient and patient? What kind of personality type do we have? I leave that open to discussion. Some people which believe in personality type indicator, others don't. There's many tools out there to determine who we are and how we are, but this is where our value system is anchored, and that is our identity.
Mm.
Our roles are those that are given to us by society, the ones we adopt through our profession, the ones we adopt through our sports, the ones we adopt in our family. So there's a multitude of roles that we adopt and have to fulfill on an ongoing basis. And learning how to switch between roles, understanding when one role finishes and another begins, or how sometimes roles do overlap, and how sometimes our identity affects our role, and how difficult it is to coordinate and to combine them. That takes a lot of skill, it takes a lot of self awareness, and a lot of honesty with oneself to understand here's where my limitations are in a role. This is a role I'm not so good at, and this is a role I'm excellent at. And understanding what is my identity that I don't want to play with, which we're not going to
Mm.
mess with, which is going to be protected.
Mm. Okay, great. So from what I hear right now, like you only have one identity. but
Yep,
multiple roles.
correct.
And can those roles happen at the same time? Or do you need to be like switching from one to the other?
Well, that's a very good question. They
Mm-hmm.
happen often that we are playing more than one role at a time, but is most of the time is intuitive, is not by design, is by default. And that is often the problem. So we need to switch. Let's take a simple example of somebody who is a leader and is in a problem, critical problem, chaos, crisis situation, dealing with the problem solving. So it has this problem solver manager role, but at the same time is caring for his own people as a leader. And managers and leaders are not always the same, and there is a lot of overlap, but you can be more one of or the other. And you can be better at one than the other. And what we're going to find is that we need to automatically switch between them. So be maybe the caring leader that we want to be, or we have to be the focused, demanding manager we need to be almost at the same time, switching between them. The key is managers that are aware of switching roles are the most effective ones. Leaders
Mm.
that know which roles they're going to be playing when are the most effective ones. Now, in some
Mm.
professions, this is relatively easy. Take, for instance, a fighter pilot is an
Mm-hmm.
officer in the Air Force, but when he is flying a mission, the role is as a fighter pilot. There is no other role at that moment. The role will not be, I'm also a dad and I'm thinking about my children's exams this week and my wife has a art exhibition. That's not going to be on this combat pilot's mind in the moment he is in
Mm-hmm.
combat because his role is going to be pilot.
Yeah.
A surgeon, when he goes to the surgery room and you're coming from the profession, once you are in the operating room and you've been there because it was your profession, you have no room and you have no attention and no span of even interest to think about, well, you need to get your car into service.
Mm.
Your dog needs a vaccination next week. Those are things which
Yeah.
are out of that role. Now, you will have
Yeah.
a role as a sister, as a mother, as a girlfriend, but you have your role in your profession. And the key is you switch and you focus on the role that you're in. And that is
Mm.
by design, not by default, because that's a decision you make. And for that, you have also uniforms. When you see people with uniforms, uniforms help people adopt a certain role. A policeman in uniform behaves different than a policeman without uniform
Mm.
because a
Okay.
uniform will automatically change the perception people have of you being a policeman
Mm.
because you're wearing a uniform or military. But
Mm.
also, your demeanor is likely to change as you move around people wearing a uniform or not wearing a uniform. In some cases, it won't be, but in many cases, it will. That's the
Mm.
R part of who you are, the role you're
From
playing at
and
that moment.
Yeah, from a CEO's perspective, you've mentioned before that you coached a few companies and teaching the importance of identity role and how to manage that was pivotal in some of these companies. Why is that?
It was because that made them a lot more effective and it made them more predictable for their teams and their people.
Mm.
They knew when he was in the role as plan manager and he wanted to have let's take a live example that we've had. This was within Goodyear at the time, a production review meeting where you're going to be reviewing the results. His focus was on numbers, and that was it, numbers. What happened with the numbers, what is the plan, what is the actual, what is the variance, what went wrong, where did it go wrong, how do we fix it, how we prevent it happening again. That was it. And his role at that moment was operations manager.
Mm.
When there were other type of meetings where we're dealing with people issues, his demeanor changed and he was more HR driven. He was more emotionally intelligent. He was more focused on people's motivation. So his
Mm.
role changed. He was still a manager. He was still in charge. He was still a leader, but his leadership skills came to bear a lot more than his managerial skills. So he could switch and he knew how to switch also from
Wow.
one meeting to the next. And also within a meeting, if you had somebody who you felt that, and I mean, this is one particular example I'm thinking of how he was doing this, that he saw somebody being a bit felt, a person that felt attacked in a meeting, and he thought that he wasn't justified. He would intervene and have his HR orientation, his people orientation, his leadership skills come to bear very, very quickly to diffuse the situation, bring homogeneity and bring harmony into the meeting, and then change the role again back into managing the numbers. But it takes a lot of
Mm,
skill to be able to do that. But it has to be
yeah.
conscious, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So from a business perspective, yes, companies run better. People are able to manage their roles well. Okay, so it is really important that your team, so coming from a from a company's perspective, it's really important that your team runs well and is able to switch from these roles, right? Because of course, we're not trying to sound like you totally shouldn't have any emotions, or you should totally be unaffected, but these your managing your roles and transitioning and separating them from your identity will help a lot in fulfilling your roles to whatever capacity you can for that particular day and time, right? um with that being said, how do you manage, switching roles?
You learn to change the focus. And I think, what we found over time, that what triggers the change is the focus. I'm not focused on a personal issue, a people issue. I'm focusing on emotional intelligence. I'm focusing on system issues. I'm focusing on product. I'm focusing on material, on customer service. I'm focusing on shareholding interests. Focusing on the board of directors. For each one of them, I'm playing a different role.
Mm,
And for each role, I have a set of skills that will come to bear, or some of my skills will be more important in one role or the other. Let's take an example of feedback. My feedback skills and communication skills, when dealing with our team, are going to be extremely important, much more so than when dealing with the board or with a customer.
mm,
When I'm dealing with a customer, probably my communication skills and empathy skills are going to be very important to show the customer that we care, to show the customer that we're serious about satisfying their needs. And when I'm dealing with the board, I'm probably going to have to be a lot more focused on results, and I have to understand what their requirements are, what their needs are, what their expectations are, and I probably have to focus more on my perception management skills. How do we
mm,
want as a management team to be perceived by our board? So this comes with practice, but it means that the focus has to be on what is interaction I'm going to go into and what are the skills that are going to be called on. So
mm.
I need, of course, like in revolving change, you always say you need all the skills and not just one skill alone that will do the job.
Yeah.
It is the chain of your expertise, of all the skills that you have at your availability. You're going to be The skills are going to be as strong as the weakest link, but you're going
Hmm.
to draw on those skills that you need for that particular task, which is focused on the people or the situation you're dealing with.
Okay.
Takes practice,
you s-
practice, practice,
it does
practice,
take practice,
practice.
but there's one perspective that I want to put into it. As a woman, it's easy. So there's this thing with men. You guys are able to just focus on one thing, and that's great. Men even have a nothing box, and a nothing box for women is like a mystery because we don't have one. Our mind is, our brain is wired to be thinking about multiple things all the time. So when you say shift the focus, sounds quite easy for a man to do, not to sound sexist or anything. I'm just pointing out facts. I'm not also generalizing. I'm just saying majority are able to easily shift focus. However, for someone who's a woman that has also multiple roles outside that of work, it could be extra challenging, don't you think?
No, I don't think so. I think the challenge is for the men more than for the woman. I've had this experience repeatedly also within business coaching at the time. Half the board were, and the senior managers were women, were
Mm-hmm.
female project directors. And the demand on them was of patience because they needed to bear with us that we were very slow compared to them.
For
So
sure.
actually, the team, often our experience was our ladies in the team were seeing many more things than we the guys saw. They saw them
Mm-hmm.
quicker. They saw them from a different angle, which is what made us very, very successful as business coaching Europe at the time, in change engineering and change management, because they saw things different than we men did. I mean, I keep saying we men were probably most of the time analog, zeros and ones, and they are digital, right? They were multiple in multiple scenarios at the same time, and were easy had it easier understanding multiple implications of a simple situations, where for us it was more analog. Well, one situation, one impact, two impacts, three impacts, it was linear, and for the ladies was not linear. So no, I don't think it was tougher for them. They had to be more patient. It was tougher sometimes for us to follow their thinking. Um, Although I will tell you that the competition between women made it sometimes very difficult in meetings because women are more competitive with each other than they are with us men. Maybe because ladies know that we sometimes cannot perform as well as you ladies do. But sometimes the issue was there was a competition between them. But that's another conversation for gender management and
For sure. But
yeah.
yeah, so yeah, I think so too. Because there are incidences wherein your R from a different, like your R from home would seep into your R here at work, and it can't be helped sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's where we men have it easier in splitting our R's than ladies do. Ladies have a
Yeah,
more
that's
often have a stronger tendency to blend the R's and mix them up, and that's where men
yeah.
don't understand, and then men maybe react maybe too chauvinistically, perceived as chauvinistic, that keep your problems out, and we don't care
Mm-hmm.
about your child that is sick. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a brutal example because I have not come across. I'm just using as an example. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the cohesion of a management team. It comes down to top management leadership, how management actually trains, shares, teaches identity role. So if we
Mm.
understand that an identity of a person is a very introvert. I'm an introvert. I mean, some people don't like to believe that and insist I'm not, but I've learned to behave like an extrovert, but I'm an introvert. And certain things I will not do, I will not say, whereas an extrovert will. And I will go like, I will just roll my eyes, like, say, here we go again. Because in my identity, I am an introvert, but in my roles, I have to often behave as an extrovert. Like when I'm in a presentation, when we're in a meeting, we are in a conference, when I'm dealing with the course, with the program. So going back to the gender question, it takes a lot of emotional intelligence, empathy, understanding to understand the roles of the others, but understand the identity of the others. And that is where very often the success is going to be. And that's where leadership in a company is called upon. Let people share their identity. Let people know each other's identity because that will be easier to interpret afterwards the roles they're playing.
Mm.
If I have to play a
Okay,
role as a manager and I'm an introvert, I will definitely play that role different than a manager that is an extrovert. But
for
if you
sure.
don't know my identity as an introvert, you will not have it so easy identifying my behavior, engaging how good or bad I am at doing certain things.
Okay, I asked that because aside from shifting focus, what else can you do to manage your roles?
Well, there's a number of skills that we have that if we are using them in the team, that will automatically support our role management. And that is one of them is perception management.
Mm.
Fundamental is our, I was say is feedback, but actually is our all communication skills are absolutely fundamental. If you have good communication skills, which means verbal, nonverbal, listening skills, feedback techniques in terms of giving feedback, soliciting feedback, accepting feedback, because most of the time people are trained to give feedback but not to receive feedback, which is equally
Hmm.
important, because if it's in only one way, feedback is going to go down the wrong tube and not
Yeah.
achieve the intended result. So having those skills are, what can you do? Well, apply those skills, and you're going to see that as you start recognizing the roles people play. You see a production manager. The production manager is a manager of production, but is also a leader of his own people. It doesn't mean his skills are going to be equally good at both roles he's playing. But he's got a role as a dad. Maybe he's a football coach for children teams, and maybe he is in charge of security for the plant. He's got a number of roles to play. So the more skills and the more skilled the person is in applying, for example, communication, perception management, feedback, the better the roles are going to transpire, and the easier going to be to
Okay.
recognize which
Would you
hat
say
you're wearing. I often call them hats. You're wearing a different hat.
would you say it also would be helpful if you're starting out? Would it be helpful if you listed out all the roles that you have and identify,
That's
I
essential,
don't
that you
know,
need to know what the roles
actions?
are. Yes. Well, you need to
Yeah.
identify what the roles are.
Yeah.
Of course, if you have a good expectations management process in the company where people know what they expect for each other, that is an integral component of your role, understanding what the expectations are of you in that role you're going to be playing. You're expected to do XYZ, you're expected not to do XYZ. So it's
Have
your role management is going to be as good as your management system is, right? If your management system supports with training, with communication, with feedback, with expectations management, then your role management is going to be probably more transparent and easier.
okay.
If it's left a bit the wild west, it's going to be hard, because people will not understand your identity, and they will not understand the roles but they will understand, they will have an opinion of a role that you play, but that opinion and that perception might not necessarily match what you are delivering in that particular role. You're going to have a mismatch, and the mismatch is going to cause problems, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So, but like if you're listening out there and you just want to start, just list down. Start with listing down your different roles and identifying what's expected of those roles, right? And
Well, yes,
verify those
yes.
expectations with other people who you actually work with within that role. I think that would be a really, really good helpful tip. And you actually mentioned something earlier that caught my attention. Costumes, right? I think what you well, the roles that we talked about earlier, they had, sorry, not costumes, uniforms.
Yeah,
I
or
meant to say
lab coat. For instance,
uniforms.
take the lab. You go into the lab and people are wearing white coats.
Yeah, and you instantly go into that role. So I was thinking, if you're working in business, it's kind of, you don't necessarily have a uniform, but you could also
But you do, you
orient
do. You
yourself.
wear a suit or you don't wear a suit. You wear a tie, you don't wear a tie.
Yeah.
You are
No,
sport
but some
elegant or you
offices,
don't. Yeah.
yeah, some offices are not as, coat and tie kind of thing. They're like, oh, casual, whatever, as most companies
More
are
and more,
nowadays.
more and more. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, as more
Yeah.
companies are nowadays. They do just have guidelines that are like, yeah, these aren't what you shouldn't be wearing, but aside from that, you're free. With that being said, I think also, as a practical tip, you designate a uniform for your role that you're taking, because then that, immediately puts you in that mindset for that role. And it will help, orient you to the present reality that I am in this role. This is the hat I am wearing, like you're saying.
But sometimes it's a tool, right? You have a meeting and you
Yeah.
have a notepad, or like I use for my meetings, I use an iPad for my notes.
Hmm.
Well, the moment you join a meeting, you have your iPad with your pen. You
Hmm.
automatically are in a role, right? You're going to be running a
Yeah.
meeting, so that is, it's part of your role,
Okay. All
right?
right.
So
So
it can
aside
be
from
just that.
uniforms, you could also,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it can be a
Yeah, that's
tool.
also another
Right.
option.
In my
Yeah.
old days, it was in business coaching, it was my coffee cup, right? I have a particular coffee
Ah.
mug, and my coffee mug
Mhm.
wasn't, that was my spot. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
he's
that would.
joining the meeting. That you knew who I was in the team. My coffee mug set up the scenario for me to be at that meeting. It may sound trivial,
Right.
but it sets a scenario.
Correct.
And there's
Yeah.
many trivial, small things that managers often
Yeah.
adopt, and some of them are very subtle. They are
Hmm.
very, very subtle, and as such, they're very interesting how people perceive those, and that's why it's important. What you were saying earlier, agree your expectations in your team, agree expectations with your peers, with your superior, with your
Hmm.
subordinates,
Hmm. Hmm.
what roles you play, and what the expectations are in each role you're going to be playing.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So that would have been a very, very helpful first step if
Yep,
you're new to the whole identity role orientation. All
definitely.
right. So we actually, well, that feels like we could talk more and more about identity role, as well as, all the other topics we've had so far. There's always more. However, it's time for us to transition into my favorite segment, wherein we take questions from real managers or real entrepreneurs, real leaders out there, and, give
Do
our,
we have many?
well, we have two today.
Okay.
We'll give our advice on what this person should
If we
do,
can, if we can.
if we can, of course. All right, so here's our first question. The title reads Tips for Separating Your Identity from Your Job. I find a lot of my ego and my mental energy wrapped up in my employment. This was really tough on me a while back when I was in between jobs, as it seems that what most people, even friends and family, associate me with and who I am is my job. My question is, what strategies have helped you separate your ego or sense of well being with what you do to keep the lights on, so to speak? Any feedback would be appreciated. Well, this person was saying in general that their identity is wrapped up in what they do. So when they were in between jobs, it was extra hard because
Hmm.
they didn't know who they were, because they thought though that that was their identity, but really they just lost a role, right? From what we were talking about earlier, your identity is you, your job is just a role. But this person is saying that, you know, he has meshed together his identity to his job, as well as ego coming into play with that. So how does he or she separate themselves from their job?
Well, obviously, I think the first problem is this person has a difficulty separating identity from role.
For
So
sure.
it's all blended together. It's like baby food. It's all blended in a. So that would be
Not
the
in a good
first
way.
step. Yeah. No, I think it's very tough, and I have found over the years that junior managers fall into that trap because they are adopting new roles as parents, they're adopting new roles as husbands, and they're changing jobs. And as they're making different moves in their careers, their roles keep changing. So it's not unusual that there's going to be a blend between the identity and the role, and certain elements from the identity will be incorporated into the role. And if management is not sensitive to help this junior managers separating identity from role, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. So the advice for this particular person is to go back to the drawing board and define clearly what are the roles that I play. Focus on roles first, and then draw a line and say, my identity, who am I?
Hmm.
What are my values? Honesty, dedication, etc. I want to get into what the individual values are for the person. It's an academic, it's not academic, it's a hands on person, whatever all the characteristics of the person are, list them and then start matching which one of these values and characteristics of me as an individual, my identity, apply to which role, because not all of them have a
Uh-huh.
bearing on every role. And start learning to separating identity from role. And that is not easy to do. And that is a major problem in conflicts. And we deal with this in problem solving and conflict resolution and negotiation, that people allow the ego to come in between. This person was mentioned, the ego. So the ego is
Yeah.
this aspiration to do better and don't touch my turf. And this is my rice ball. Don't mess with my rice ball. Well, it all depends what role you're in. Okay. So if your role is now that my performance results affect my income, so this is messing with my rice ball, it's messing with my personal life, then you have an area of overlap which makes it difficult, because your identity, your personal well-being, your family life is going to be affected by the role in business. So, and it's not easy to do. You need to split them too. Both of them need to be split. You need to focus on your value systems and on your principles. What is my identity? And then what is my role in business? But you have a role as parent. You have a role as maybe family head or family co-head with your wife. So there is no easy answer to it other than go back to basics and really focus on defining what are the roles, and goes back to something you said earlier, which was very, very valuable and very rich. Develop, document the expectations for each of your roles, and then deal
Mm.
with those people you're dealing with in that role, peers, superiors, and subordinates, all of them, and go through an expectations management process so that your
Mm.
roles are clearly defined and boxed in. So they're not
Mm.
overlapping that much anymore, or not at all, ideally. And then you can start separating them from your identity.
Okay.
It's not an easy answer, and I wish I had a better
No,
answer.
it's not. Yeah. But yeah, back to basics of just like identifying and then clearly,
Like so often in life, back to basics.
yeah, yeah, clearly defining a line. That actually is helpful. Okay, our second question for today is titled Managing Employees with Personal Issues Affecting Work. I recently became a director of a small nonprofit drug and alcohol rehab. I have an employee with personal problems affecting her productivity, mainly motivation. She also brings her personal issues to work and always seeks other employees' advice. I want to build a cohesive environment, but her going to other coworkers also affects her productivity. I've been trying to foster a family, air quote, environment, which I admire about this program, but I also don't want it to hinder everyone's responsibilities. How should I address this? Do I sit with the employees giving advice and address it with them? Sometimes the employees will talk for 30 to 40 minutes or longer.
Okay, well, obviously, this 30, 40 minutes conversations don't lead to a result because it continues to happen. So
Yeah.
that's obviously operationally not an answer to the problem.
Mm.
And of course, in a nonprofit helping people with addiction problems, I guess you want to be extremely careful and considerate how you go about with emotional intelligence and problem solving skills and confrontation and negotiation. I think the focus would be on talking to both, because a person asks, should I talk to the team, should I talk to the individual? I think he needs to talk to both, but separately. First, I think would be talking to the actual person, and maybe make it the leadership role of this manager, this leader, this new manager in charge. Make it the person's role to deal with this team member's problems, being the contact person. So schedule yourself to be available for this person, half an hour a week, or a particular day, maybe beginning of the week. How was your weekend? What were the problems? What's going to happen this week? Where can we help you? What help do you need? And focus on work planning for the week. At the same time, probably no, most likely explain to this person that it is defocusing other employees from their work, is becoming disruptive and expensive to share her problems and seek advice from so many different other people, so that we'll replace, not refrain. We're not telling her not to do it, but we're telling her to focus more on one person, and that person is going to be me as a leader of the team. That would be my spontaneous reaction to it. And
Mhm.
then have a meeting with the team and say, we understand that this person in the team needs help, and we have come up with the solution, which is I'm going to be personally taking care of her or him, whoever that is. And I would appreciate if, and this should be done with the whole team present, also
Yeah.
with this
Hmm.
person present. If we
Hmm.
slip on this and fall into the trap, let's remind each other, and that we have this call and this meeting with her, that I will have it and you send her to me, so that you don't feel uncomfortable ending a discussion or a conversation, because people are going to feel uncomfortable that somebody's asking for
Right.
help and they need to turn her down. I'm saying her, I
Yeah.
don't know if it's a her or a him. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe at the beginning, I was thinking now, as we were progressing on the question, that probably at the beginning to schedule 2 or 3 meetings in the week for 20 minutes. So
Hmm.
three 20-minute meetings, 1 hour, beginning of the week, middle of the week, end of the week, and use the progress then to go to 2 meetings a week and then eventually to 1 meeting a week. Because probably if this person is talking to several members of the team, that 1 meeting is not going to be enough to begin with. But what you want to break
Yeah.
is the habit of talking to everybody else, and you want them to focus on one person. Then you can become more acquainted with her needs, with her problems and her challenges, and how you can help this person,
Hmm.
and focus also on work. So we have
Yeah.
the role as a mentor and coach, and you have the role as a manager. So as a mentor and coach, you're going to deal with this person's problems, you're going to be empathetic, and you're going to be hopefully having suggestions on how to deal with them. But you're also going to be the manager dealing with the work that needs to be done. So that would
Yeah.
be my advice, to take control over the process.
Right. There's a lot of expectations management going on with what you said. You're managing the expectations of the person that needs to be helped, but you're also managing the expectations of the team. At the same time, affirming the team that they should need not spend any more time.
They should rather not need to. They should rather
Yeah.
not, and
Yeah.
channel
They
her
should
to talk
rather
to me.
not.
Yes.
Correct. They should rather not, in the interest of
You can
maintaining their
even create
productivity.
tools saying, well, if she has questions or this person has questions, help her writing them down. So in the upcoming meeting with me, we can go through them. So get them
Right.
to actually help articulate what is the problem they're dealing with, document it, and stop. So you start reducing the
Yeah.
interactions and reducing
Correct.
the time is taking of their work.
Right. And this person's feelings or concerns are still being addressed because there is a
Sure.
dedicated time and place to do so. So
Not only that, I think as a
I
part of the culture, you want the rest of the team to see that we're not just pushing somebody aside or ignoring this
yeah, for
person's
sure.
issues, but we want to
Yeah.
deal with it in an effective, productive way.
Yeah.
Effective for the team, effective for the person, and effective for the company,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
organization.
And I was also about to say that, like, for the person that needs help, it's also going to allow them to compartmentalize. Be like, yeah, okay, I
Hopefully.
have an opportunity. Well, yeah, hopefully. I have an opportunity to talk about this at lengths, well, at the given time frame that was allowed of me.
Yep.
So they should be able to be like, hopefully, they
Well,
should be
it's a
able to be
question.
like, yeah, I'll.
I mean, this manager leader needs to use, for instance, a vocabulary which is inviting. We invite this person to share, we invite this person to seek input. So it's going to be very important how the whole approach is presented, how the vocabulary we use, the demeanor, the empathy. And yet at the same time, we need to be assertive. This is the way we want to do it from now on. We need to be more effective at what we do. So for the manager is quite a demanding situation. So if we can
Yeah.
help, if the person wants to contact us or has many of any of our other visitors and members has input and suggestions for this manager, please, I would very much like to hear if you have other suggestions to help this particular manager in this situation, because it's not unusual that you
Yeah.
have members in the team supporting each other and management is not part of it and is affecting productivity. So
Yeah. It's a very, very common thing that happens a lot. All right. So that is all the time that we have today. I hope we were able to provide the people who have questions adequate answers. If you
please
who are
let
listening
us know
today
if you
have
have
questions,
questions.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're listening today or you're watching this, if you have questions, just send it to us. You can contact us via email through our website, or you can just simply type your questions in the comment section below.
That's the
So,
best.
yeah, yeah. So until the next podcast, this has been Joanna, and
Thank you.
here with me today is Jorge. We want to thank you for listening, and we hope to see you at the next one. Bye.
See you soon.